Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to How to Eat an Elephant. I'm your host, Ian, joined as usual by Emily and Megan. Hello,
Hello.
ladies.
Hi.
How
Hello,
are we
Ian.
this morning?
We're great. We're
Listen,
doing
I have a
great.
question for you. Anyone who has read this section will, I hope, welcome this question. How are you feeling about the musical adaptation here in the middle of this piece? There have been moments where Hugo gives us these delicious little tidbits of story. This was perhaps not one of those moments. So I guess before we dive into the meat of our section for the day, I just want to know if you think this musical was a faithful adaptation of the novel.
That's a fun question. So far, I think yes. I mean, I think all the things that they, compacted and summarized in various thematic and rousing songs worked and were right on the nose thematically.
Yeah.
And a great condensation of many, 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 many pages, I will say I didn't understand why the college kids in the ABC group or whatever were so upset. And Hugo goes into it and will tell us a lot more about that. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But thematically, each character who has a spotlight or a song devoted to them, so far their song has been a great summary of all the themes associated with them, at least in my opinion. What do you think, Emily?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the writers whose names escape me at this moment, I think they latched on to all the right images.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that Hugo was most concerned with. And
Yeah.
and to answer what was underlying your question, Ian, it's not like we would be thrilled by a song about why, in Megan's words, they were angry. Like, we don't want to hear a song about the usurpations of Louis Philippe, even though he might actually be a nice guy.
He might, man, what a confusing thing. Well, it got me to thinking, and this is something that we've been chewing on at CenterForLit generally, in regard to, here's a little advertising blip, an upcoming book from our director. But it's true to say, I think, that literature and philosophy come at the human experience from opposite directions. Philosophy begins with abstract principles and reasons their way, abstract truths, right? Axioms, and reasons down toward the human experience. Whereas literature takes as its means the details of people's real lives, relational and spatial and temporal details, and reasons upward toward philosophical axioms. Cool. And so when we read Tolstoy, which we did a second ago, and now reading Hugo, it's almost like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. And he's doing both. He's taking the temporal spatial details of people's real lives and reasoning upward toward philosophy, but he's also starting with philosophical principles and trying to boil those down into something human. And right now, what I'll say, as of this section, I can't tell which of those two approaches in Hugo is going to be the most effective yet. I'm not sure he's come down firmly enough on either side of that line for me to know what kind of novel this is going to be in the end. What do you guys think of that?
I agree. I think I see what you mean when you say that Hugo is starting, like, some authors just do start with very firm, thematic principles in mind, which are, in this case, to some extent, political, economic, etc. And he is writing to elaborate on those themes. Whereas, some authors start with their characters and setting and kind of work out from there. But I think I would kind of sharpen the difference between Tolstoy and Hugo by saying that Tolstoy really was engaging in philosophy, abstract principles. Whereas thus far, when Hugo does something that where we say, here it is, the Tolstoy section, it's history, not philosophy so much, which is very related to literature in that it grabs onto concrete facts. And he's going to have a discussion here that I think is really fruitful about the difference between facts and right. But it does something similar in that it starts with the concrete and works its way towards the abstract.
Well, either way, this section spends a long time. I mean, you guys, goodness gracious, this was a very...
It was long. It took a long time to read.
This took a really long time to read. It was not all that many pages. I think the section was 50 or 55 pages or something, but It took 2.5 hours to get through them all.
I
mean, it
know.
was just a brutal
I also
slog.
think there are ways to read productively, and there are ways to sort of, I don't know, sort of saunter your way through the reading. And if you read with a glass of wine, which is what I did, that slows you down. So it took me forever. And by the time I got to the end of it, I thought, what did I read?
What
And I went to
happened?
Schmoop. If you guys don't know about Schmoop, listeners, it's like a better and funnier version of Spark Notes.
Yep.
But I needed it this time to figure out what in the world was going on in that history lesson.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive in then. What's with the history lesson? I mean, I was talking to Emily off the air, getting my centuries mixed up. Like, okay, which revolution are we talking about here? Like, it's also very French, and it's also very impassioned, and all the ideas are around liberty, equality, fraternity, and all that kind of thing. And so, where are we? Situate me in history.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the French Revolution,
but it is born of it.
It's born of it. It's subsequent to the French Revolution, the actual one, right? And it's bloodless? ?
Yeah. Okay. So, quick reminder: 1797. We have the French Revolution that you think of when you think of
The Reign of
French
Terror.
Revolution, the Reign of Terror,
Yeah.
the guillotines, all of that, which he does talk about in this section. So that might be confusing.
So brace thyself.
And he has
Okay.
he like gives some actual opinions about it that I thought were interesting. Then obviously after that devolves into the Napoleonic Empire, and then Napoleon is sent away, and we get the restoration of the Bourbons. So like France is basically trying to reinstitute the monarchy that they overthrew in the French Revolution.
But to do it better, different, in a different but better way.
Yes, they kind of try to do
Yes.
something like England did in their revolution and say, okay, you can be king, but we have some demands. And Hugo talks about that, right? He talks about how the people put forward these constitutional demands and like claimed their rights to free speech and like all of that, like association and all that stuff. And the king, from his perspective, who is Louis the 18th and then later Charles the 10th, I believe, he basically says he thinks that he is the one giving them these rights, and Hugo says no, like it was the people who demanded these of him.
Right.
So fast forward a little bit to 1830, and the Bourbons, who had like given all of these rights, all of a sudden were like, psych,
we want them back.
We want them back. Like, no more freedom in the press, like no more liberty for the individual. And the people obviously were not very pleased with that. But then, like, in their revolt against that, it was like very tame. I can't like say 100% that there was no bloodshed. I'm not like that educated on the subject, but
it wasn't a reign of terror again.
Right. It was like basically they didn't kill the reigning monarch Charles the 10th. They just sent him into exile. It was very calm transition of power. There was some kind of form of election of the new king, and that would be
by a parliament or a congress, right?
Something like that. I don't know how represented the people were in that decision, but there was kind of some say in that. It wasn't just they chose a family to put on the throne instead, and that's where we get Louis Philippe.
So he was elected of the people
to be a monarch.
Louis Philippe was to be a sort of monarch. Okay.
And the way that Hugo describes him is as this bridging of the gap between the divine right idea of kingship, a representative of the blood, as it were, and a bourgeois man of the people.
And then I think this might be helpful to know, like, we're going to end up talking mostly about something that happened in Louis Philippe's reign a couple years in, like the discontent among the friends of the ABC and all of that. Like, we're in like the 1832 range at this point in the story. But as someone who wasn't educated about this when they watched the musical, I always took the story as like kind of a ultimate tragedy. Like, these people sacrificed their lives at the barricades for something that was of no value, because eventually the people are discontent that they still have a king, even though he might be something of a enlightened king. But actually in 1848 there is another change in the republic. There is another republic that like Louis Philippe is ousted and the republic is reinstituted. So like they are marching their way towards more of the rights of man, something more of a democratic republic. And Louis Philippe is a step along the way. So this discontent that's broiling, like it is actually eventually going to lead to something.
By what date again? Repeat the
48.
date for me. By 48. Okay.
Yeah, but that's like I don't know that we get to see that.
Right.
No, yeah, I don't think we do. I mean, my understanding of the story is that it's over within a couple of years from the present date.
So this is like a very early outbreak of discontent,
which I think is an intentional choice on his part, because one of the things he seems to be concerned with is painting the way a society ministers unto itself, which is fraught with turmoil and suffering and difficulty, but is ultimately inexorable and good.
Yeah.
Right. That the idea that progress is something holy and kind of something unavoidable, and that it takes as its driving force collective forces that aren't down to any one person. So in that way, he kind of opposes the notion of monarchy, or at least says that it's wrongheaded in where it assumes it's getting its power. That really where power to move nations comes from is the salt of the earth, the average human being in all of his masses, right?
Yeah, and I think also another, like, to continue on what you're saying, I think thematically it's appropriate for him to focus on this early outbreak because he seems to be concerned about the seeming hopelessness of suffering and the fact that it will eventually be worthwhile in the end, even though right now
that it's a crucible for change.
Yeah, even though in the moment it may seem pointless. So like we compare what's coming at the barricades to Fontaine, right? The seemingly pointless death.
I don't know if that helps me be okay about having read this last part. I mean, it felt a little bit like what was happening is that Hugo was an old man with lots of super duper well-developed opinions about minutia from his own political era. And they may be perfectly true opinions, but until he steps back and starts talking about the ebb and flow of history, rather than the minute differences between different political ideas in his own era, it's less interesting to me. That probably exposes me as a bad reader in some way, shape, or form. But I had a really hard time paying attention. I did.
Well, one thing that happened, I think, is we've been saying this whole time, what does Hugo actually think about all this? And I think he does actually tell us in this section where he stands.
Enlighten me.
Well, I mean, this is open for discussion, but I took him to be saying that he admires Louis Philippe's principles as a man, but he does not appreciate the monarchy. He is democratic. He's also highly sympathetic to the socialist cause, but he wants to clarify that he doesn't like. He basically wants to make sure to clarify that from communism.
Or maybe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe the distinction that he's drawing is between goals and means. That he agrees with the principle that is at the root of socialism, which is to say that if we can find a way to produce wealth and distribute it in an equitable, not an equal, but an equitable way, that will actually solve the problems of society. He thinks that's true, but he also sees a problem inherent in the acquisition and accumulation of power necessary to redistribute that wealth and what that power actually does to the process, which is to say it doesn't carry forward its aim in the end. I don't know if he's gone yet to providing a solution for that problem. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I'm just trying to get my head around it because all of this that you're saying is very helpful. It's jogging my memory about things that remind me of wine. But yes, I didn't feel that he was offering his position so much as poking holes in all of the theories Here's the problem with the monarchy. Here's the problem with socialism. It would be the ideal, except it doesn't work for all of these reasons. And those who have the power to distribute the wealth get corrupted by the wealth and don't distribute it. And,
Right.
you know, it didn't seem that he was saying, here is the perfect social order. Instead, he was saying, society's a mess. Look at all the ways that it's messy. At least that's what I took from it.
I do think that he really does believe that socialism could work, but that it's inexorably tied to the spiritual condition of a country. Because I wonder if he really has been tying material wealth to spiritual
he has
well-being this whole time. And I really think the issue is that he, in his opinion, it's a Father Bienvenu who needs to be doing this, right? Like he needs to be the one in charge. I don't know. That's speculation.
Maybe
I like that though.
Maybe I could see that. The other thing though that's interesting to me is that in this chapter where he describes the socialist idea and he walks us through the principle.
What chapter is that? For our listeners' sake, let's call it by a name.
Yeah, good point. It's chapter 4.
Okay, Cracks in the Foundation.
Cracks in the Foundation, it's called. That's exactly right. On page 834 of our edition, he sort of sums up and says, this above and beyond a few stray sects is what socialism said. That's what it sought to realize. This is what it outlined in men's minds. Admirable efforts, sacred attempts. He then, however, immediately, after outlining this principle, calling it admirable and even sacred, he then goes to trotting out its result. And before too long, in the very next chapter, is making gentle fun, at least in my reading, is making gentle fun of the fact that part of the reason this socialist principle won't work is that no one is actually capable, including a king. No one is capable of holding within one's mind and heart all of the necessary exigencies of the scenario in order to make a good decision. Because what's actually happening in a society at any one given time is so vast and composed of so many different people with individual concerns that it can't be managed except by God himself, by the hand of providence.
By God and the people, I think. Like, I really do think that there is a political component to this. And
Emily's like, no, still no.
No, I agree. I feel like, I don't know.
But do you not get the humor I'm talking about? I mean, listen to this. Of a private conversation between 4 men crouching in a ditch at the fork of the road by the Barrière du Trône was caught only this: everything possible will be done, so he'll no longer walk the streets of Paris. Who was he? Obscurely threatening. Like, there's a little sarcasm in that. And I think it's gentle, and I don't think he intends to be scathing, but there is a sense in which the individual, mired in his own concerns, isn't a giant moving civilization. It's only in the collective that anything ever gets done, right?
Yes. And that's where I see him being, like, I see him seeing the progress of society very much the way that Tolstoy did.
Yeah, I think so too.
It really is socialism that he's going for, but at the head of it is God. On page 830, before what you read, he says, God makes his will visible to men in events, an obscure text written in a mysterious language. Men make their translations of it instantly, hasty translations incorrect, full of mistakes, omissions, and misreadings. Very few minds understand the divine language.
Right.
And then basically he says the wisest do, but at the time that they have actually had time to figure it out, it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, and as a result of the hastiness, there are parties that are formed, and each party is only a fraction of the truth.
Right. Yes. There are innumerable parties, all of which have names that sound exactly like each other. I mean, he does a whole long joke about it. He lists them all. And pretty soon the names all get mixed up and he starts making up names. I mean,
but it's like, oops, sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Emily, do you think that what he means is if we would pause and take the time to really, with our wisest men, discern the will of God, then we could create a party that would work? Like, he's hopeful that there's a social regime that we could institute that would solve the problem?
I'm not sure. I don't think that he would say that it's the human being who's capable of that. At the beginning of Cracks in the Foundation, it turns out, I guess that's a really important chapter. On 829, he talks about the different factions And he says, society bleeds under this struggle, but its suffering of today will be its safety hereafter.
Mm.
And in any event, there is no censure due to those who struggle. One of the two parties is obviously mistaken. Right is not like the Colossus of Rhodes on two shores at once, one foot in the Republic, one foot in royalty. It is indivisible, and all on one side. But those who are mistaken are sincerely mistaken. A blind man is no more a guilty party than a vending is a bandit. So let us impute these terrible collisions only to the fatality of things. Whatever these tempests may be, human responsibility is not involved. So like I guess that's why I'm trying to like walk this line, because I really do think that he is a committed Republican socialist.
Yeah.
But he's also highly sympathetic to the struggle. He's willing to see the good on the other side. There are lots of very positive things that he says about Louis Philippe as a monarch, even though he doesn't necessarily agree with him. And that he sees something fruitful in the struggle itself that is ultimately not human, but divine.
Well, and I think also he's an author, not just a political theorist.
Mm-hmm.
And so his topic is always going to be, behold, here is a man. This is what a human being looks like. And I think he admits throughout the course of this section that human beings cannot help but take a side. And I am one. And so I've taken one.
Yeah.
But he acknowledges that our minds are too teeny tiny to know right completely. It's really hard to discern the will of God. On 846, this is at the end of chapter 5 in this section, he sort of leaves off of the political conversation with what amounts to a sort of defiant and maybe even kind of humble choice in the matter. And he says, pushed to the limit and beside themselves, terrible, half-naked, a club in their hands and a roar in their mouths, they demanded this holy, good, and gentle thing, progress. They were savages, yes, but the savages of civilization. In contrast with these men, wild we admit, and terrible, but wild and terrible for the good, there are other men, smiling, embroidered, gilded, beribboned, in silk stockings, in white feathers, in yellow gloves, in polished shoes, who, leaning on a velvet table beside a marble mantle, softly insist on the maintenance and preservation of the past. The Middle Ages, divine right, fanaticism, ignorance, slavery, the death penalty and war, glorifying politely and in mild tones the saber, the stake, and the scaffold. As for us, if we were compelled to choose between the barbarians of civilization and the civil advocates of barbarism, we would choose the barbarians. But thank heaven another choice is possible. No sheer fall is necessary, forward no more than backward. Neither despotism nor terrorism. We desire progress on a gentle slope. God provides for this, the smoothing of slopes. This is God's whole policy.
Oh, it's beautiful.
There's a lot wrapped up in there, but the thing that I see first is, look, I have to make a call because I'm just a human being. I can't stand outside the fray. No one can. To do so is to betray oneself. And so here I am making a call. I'll choose this particular kind of inhumanity because I think it aims for something I consider to be good. And having made that choice, I cast it all on the benevolence of God. That line, above all the other ones we've read so far, I think, justifies him as an artist and an author rather than a political theorist, in my view.
Yeah, that's good. I think I mentioned this the last time we were talking, but it reminds me of something that I have heard was an idea of Hugo's, which was his rebuff to the romantics, that you're so focused on the sublime, but life also requires the grotesque. And the grotesque is also meaningful and provides for, I guess what he would say, progress. That the ugly, grotesque things of the world are also in some way necessary to it. So the things that we disagree with, the parties we disagree with, if we take it on a literal level, like there's a purpose for those other parties' existence.
Well, with that sort of transition from the historical outlines, the first real person he mentions is Enjolras. So I think we're about to get the reason for the digression, which is let's explain the position of the, what do you call it, Emily? The Abase Club?
Abase.
The Abase Club. The abased ones? I don't know. Anyway,
right.
These guys that are going to be the crew on the barricades. And they're clearly a species of the exact issue he's been talking about, right? They're one among many. and they are noble, and maybe made more noble by the fact that the task they have undertaken is too big for them, in Hugo's view. Do you guys agree with that assessment?
Wait, did you say that they think that the task is more noble?
No, I said that they are noble, maybe not for the reasons that they think they are.
Right.
They're noble in
yes.
Hugo's view because they are making a bid for progress and for the good. And he knows that the bid is too large for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that leads him to look down on them or pity them or criticize them. I think
No,
he
but it does
elevates
remind
their
me
passion.
as a reader of how young they are. They seem idealistic and zealous and inexperienced, and like this even-handedness that we've seen from him, what made you call him a grandfather, Ian, they lack. They're all extremes, and they're on fire about the Edenization of the world, just like he is in his heart, but they lack the balance of experience, or maybe that picture that he gave us of a wise man taking his time to really suss out the whole truth. Enjolras is kind of an angel of fury rather than an even-handed, wise, white-haired old man, you know? And that makes me fundamentally admire him and distrust whatever he's going to do next.
And also the men that he's forced to rely on, like Grantaire. Basically, they pledge their faithfulness and then can't carry through. Like Peter in the garden, right? Like pray and then fall asleep. Like they just can't do it.
I know that whole conversation between Grantaire and Enjolras really hurt my heart, because Enjolras is so mean to Grantaire, and Grantaire really admires him and would do anything for him like a puppy dog. But then in the end, Enjolras is right to distrust him because he can't stay focused for 1 second. He's off playing a dice game at the end, or playing dominoes or something.
Yeah, there's that side of it, and I agree with you. My heart hurt too, because I kind of like Grantaire instinctively. But also, I wonder if Grantaire has a handle on something Enjolras doesn't. And not again, I don't think Hugo is drawing lines between these two men in order to cast down the one and elevate the other. But I think he's looking at two different ways of seeing humanity and interacting with it. Enjolras sent Grantaire and sent all of his minions to different quarters of the city to specifically, he would probably say, inspire and impassion and call to action. But to be frank, to manipulate, to manipulate people in different quarters of the city to take up arms. That is his goal. Grantaire, on the other hand, looks around and goes, I mean, okay, sure. I'll do that because I love you. And I think you're a good dude. There's something authentic in the way Grantaire behaves, and something idealistic in the way that Enjolras behaves. I think there's good things about both of those, but I don't know. I lean Grantaire a little bit. What do you guys think?
I mean, definitely. I think Grantaire's more of a human being than Enjolras. I just think that what he promises Enjolras is not his best. I think that when he promises Enjolras all that he wants him to, he doesn't sound like himself. He sounds much more like himself when he's playing dominoes, you know? And I like him better than Enjolras, 100%. But he's going to get sucked under to whatever Enjolras is doing, because he's got this ideal of the man that I think is, I don't know, this section made me afraid of Enjolras. Like he's he's an angel of fury, and all of these adoring fans are going to get sucked under whatever his glimpse of the luminous future is, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really well put. It also made me pity Enjolras.
Yeah.
Because we've just been given a decades-long understanding of France's history. And we now are equipped to know that Enjolras is in no way unique.
He's not alone in thinking all these things.
Right. He's not alone in thinking all of these things. He is not the beleaguered hero he assumes himself to be. He is, first of all, Hugo's careful to say, a dignified human soul worthy of respect and honor. All of that is true. I don't think he's belittling the man, but he is looking at him and saying, you are a symptom of the problem. You are a piece in a much, much larger game. And the game can't go forward, perhaps, without people that believe, as Enjolras does, that they are essential to the scope of history. But that doesn't change the fact that he's going to die alone with his friends on the barricade and won't see any of the changes that he thinks sending out his buddies, his teenage buddies, into the different corners of the city to promote an uprising are gonna do. So I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
I'm looking
tragic.
at that section on page 849 in our book. Enjolras is like feeling the gravity of events and considering the future that he dreams of. And he says, a phenomenon that brings on collapses and rebirths. Enjolras caught glimpses of a luminous uprising under the dark skirts of the future. Who knows? Perhaps the moment was approaching. The people seizing their rights again. What a glorious spectacle. The revolution majestically resuming possession of France and saying to the world, tomorrow, Enjolras was pleased.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think there's such a healthy dose of, you hear his young, zealous spirit, and also there's a portentous feeling like this is actually what's going to happen. We've had our history lesson, and we know
Right.
that there's a cycle going on here, and that if the cycle continues to repeat, as history is wont to do, Enjolras is right about all of this. Maybe not with such a triumphant finality, but we are due for a revolution next, and there is going to be some kind of rebirth, but the collapse has to come first. So a phenomenon that brings on collapses and rebirths, Enjolras is going to be part of a collapse in a lot of ways. And so there's I don't know, a feeling of heaviness.
Yeah. It's a little tragic. It's a little tragic.
Did anyone else get the call out to the musical in this one? Grantaire is ready to go do what Enjolras has asked, and he dresses up in a Robespierre waistcoat and steps out. And he just looks at Enjolras and winks and says, "Red," and then leaves the scene. And all I could think of was "Red, the blood of angry men."
100%.
Oh man, it's a bit on the nose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, like, true to form, Enjolras is like, I can't use Marius. He's out like
Mooning over some girl.
Right.
Feel my heart on fire.
Well,
I mean, yeah.
it's another way in which the musical is well written, though, because that song, Marius musing on his lady love and Enjolras musing on the revolution, happened in the same song. And I think there is absolutely a relationship between those things. We look at Marius and we say, dude, you still literally do not know this woman's name. Come now, you've stopped working. You're slowly beginning to starve, physically starve.
And you're just letting it happen.
My dude, like there's something of youth in this situation. And I think we're supposed to look at him and Enjolras side by side and say, these guys are doing the same thing.
Isn't there a part where he kind of compares love to war? Like that there's a way in which both of these figures are idealizing something, and the force of its reality maybe is going to come crashing in upon them. But I think that they're related, the love and the war.
Yeah, I agree.
Something to do with suffering. I don't know.
If we circle back to Ian's initial question, I think it's a huge plug for the musical, because thematically that song is juxtaposing those two things, red and black, the color of love, the color of death, or both colors for both things. It's very, very symbolic. There you go, producers
Nice.
of the musical.
Nice job, guys.
There you go. If
My
only we could
final
remember your names.
Are they? I just have to wonder, like, do you guys think they are literally playing dominoes like a bunch of like nursing home ladies? I mean, I like say that facetiously. I also myself enjoy a good game of dominoes. Like they are vicious.
They probably didn't call it Mexican Train.
This is like literally playing dominoes with my grandmother, who is almost this vicious sometimes.
Right. Well, if they are playing dominoes, I don't recognize the point system that they are. You're done for. 2, 6, 3, ace. It's my turn. What is happening? You guys don't play dominoes right. You got to match the numbers. Ace, ace. Now it's your turn.
DR, JFK.
Yeah, exactly.
So from the
true American,
from Hugo's what I will call his eternal condescension. He wants to talk about history and he wants to talk about all these political movements, and he deigns to give us a little human connection at the end of that meditation by reminding us that these are the very movements in which Enjolras and Grantaire and the rest are going to participate. Okay. We then get a blessed reprieve by getting some more Marius and some more Eponine and some more character-driven plot for a second. What do you guys make of this last section? There's some light on the horizon for Marius, right? He has now learned where Cosette lives.
Well, yes. Although the first part of this section, he just finds out that there's a field called the Field of the Lark, and he spends some months walking around because he's discovered that her name is not Ursula, but that her nickname is the Lark. So he finds a place with that name and figures he will eventually learn her name there. So there's some more ridiculousness.
Isn't there also a river that runs through it called like the River of the Gobelins or something like that, which is very close to goblins, which is what Eponine is compared to in this section?
Yes, it's just very true.
He's getting himself embroiled in something of a complicated affair here.
Love triangle.
He's completely unaware of it, though.
He's totally unaware. Well, I also thought in this section it was beautiful. Eponine's character comes into focus a little bit more. She gets released from prison. She's used a little bit more by the crooks and villains that her father is caught up with because she knows no other way. But she has a mission from Marius that she was unable to complete for 2 weeks because she was in prison, and she hasn't forgotten him or the mission. So she finds Monsieur Mabeuf, I think is how you say his name, and does him a good deed, a good turn, so that she can get Marius's location from him. I thought that whole scene was really beautiful, though, because she's described, it's the first time she's described not as repellent. She's not this horrible creature from the underworld. She's actually described as some kind of heavenly sprite being offered to him in his moment of need. And she serves him openly and actually waters plants and brings things to life. And all of the imagery that we've seen of rain being life-giving and plants being where hope is found in the world. And everyone who's tending a garden is supposed to be a good character. And here Eponine is doing all of those things, which I think was important to see before she interacts with Marius again. It gave us a glimpse into the beauty in her heart before we see her in a new way as she's interacting with Marius. She's got puppy love for him for sure. So I think it would have been easy when she's described as newly beautiful when she shows up to Marius again. It would have been easy to just say, oh, she's in love now. But actually, I think we're supposed to see that there's beauty in her personality and in her character that we didn't get to see before. So I don't know. I thought it was significant character development for her.
I agree. I think her self-concept is complicated, though. She's Father Mabeuf sees her as a sprite, but also he's been reading about goblins, and then he says, well, maybe that was a goblin. It sounds a lot like what I've been reading. And he says, God bless you. You are an angel since you care for flowers. No, she answered, I'm the devil, but that's all the same to me. So like she kind of sits on that line between angel and devil, sprite and goblin.
Yeah.
I wonder what it is that pushes someone in dire straits to either side of that line. I mean, he's danced up to the edge of making claims about that before. He's talked about the evil in the human heart and how it's connected to poverty and lack of education and all of that. But in Eponine's case, I wonder. Go ahead, Megan.
At least, I mean, this is what I see Hugo saying so far. She is different from her father in one really strong way. And it's that when she interacts with a new person, she doesn't just see them as what they can give to her, but she sees them as an opportunity of someone to serve. And she does it not just to Marius because she has puppy love for him, but to everyone else that we've seen her interact with. She serves her father. She does that willingly. She serves the rest of the crooks who ask her for favors. Absolutely. She helps Marius with whatever he needs. She shows up to Mabeuf and says, I can carry that water for you. She's giving and generous and sees other people as fellow sufferers rather than, opportunities to get her needs met.
That's true, I think. Yeah, I like that.
Towards Marius, she seems to be making the ultimate sacrifice in recognizing that it's the lark that he's in love with, even though she loves him. And yet she still leads him to her.
Yeah. I don't know. I think she's fundamentally empathetic, that when she reacts to a person, her first response is, I understand this about you. At least we see that most with Marius, but her first instinct is to understand and to put him in context and then serve him. I think that's beautiful.
On page 866, when she walks in on Marius, it says, strangely, she had become more impoverished and more beautiful. 2 further steps that seemed impossible. She had accomplished a double progress toward the light and toward distress. So she is also a character who was proclaimed ugly, who has been made beautiful. And I believe the difference is the love that she feels.
Mm.
Or in this case, he actually compares it specifically to her
suffering,
her
actually.
descent. Yeah. The descent is making her more beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Which is why, that's why I say I think the heart of what makes her beautiful is empathy, because the more you have suffered or experienced sorrow, the more opportunity there is for you to empathize with people that you interact with. And she's I don't know, that gift of hers is stronger out of prison than it was even before. So it might not be love that makes her so beautiful this time. It might be suffering.
Yeah. Marius just being clueless.
Marius is a little hard
idiot.
for me to read. What a mooning idiot that guy is.
I couldn't remember, you guys help me remember this. When she says, you promised me something, I'll give you the address, I'll sacrifice all of my hopes and dreams and do this for you. I know that you don't notice me this way, but you promised me something. What did he promise her?
He promised her whatever she wants if she can find Cosette's house.
Good grief.
And he just immediately assumes that's money.
Which, of course, is a brutal assumption.
Yeah.
Awful. Of course, I mean, it seems pretty clearly telegraphed that what she thinks she's going to get is him.
Or, like, she probably was like a kiss or like,
right.
She was going to ask for something in return.
Which is a little poignant because it reminds you how young she is.
Yeah.
Which is heartbreaking. Goodness.
Oh, man. And then it's extra heartbreaking when she says, don't walk with me, because it wouldn't do for a fine young man like you to be seen with a woman like me.
Yep.
And she's a child saying this, but there's deep significance in calling herself that.
Right. Yeah, she's underage still, we're told, which is one of the reasons they can't keep her in prison.
When that's her self-concept as the devil, right?
Yeah.
She even
a fallen woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In spite of her love for Marius, she has no delusions about her fitness for that relationship.
Right. Well, you guys, thank you for helping me through the historical weeds.
Same. Emily just carried us on her shoulders, kind of like Valjean.
Emily,
I feel like Emily's the Valjean of this section.
Speaking of Valjean, like I really want some more Valjean. Like I was kind of attached to him as a principal character, and I really want to read about him some more.
I love that Hugo is still like insistently calling him LeBlanc or whatever.
Also, I know. There was a section where Javert was like, oh man, if only I'd gotten the prisoner and made the prisoner a prisoner, and still doesn't say it's Valjean. I don't know that he knows. I'm confused. Why don't we just acknowledge what we know here?
I mean, maybe Hugo has a really low opinion of us as readers. He thinks we're snowed, and it's going to be a shock when the lark is revealed to be Cosette.
I don't think so. He knows we know. I think that he's just carrying this thematic principle rather far.
Yeah. Okay, so last thing before I let you guys go off and have a day and let you listeners go keep reading. There was a passage in this section describing Louis Philippe where he launches into a description and then forgets that the period is one of the things we have in language.
Oh,
and uses only semicolons for a full 2 pages of text. One sentence.
I did not notice this.
Technically and grammatically, it's one sentence.
Show us where this is.
Here, I'll look it up for you.
I mean, that resonates with my experience of reading it, but I thought that was on me, so I'd be glad to know.
Oh, it was just it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Let's see. Louis Philippe. Okay, so it's from page 822, about halfway down the page.
Okay.
The sentence that precedes it is Louis Philippe was an exceptional man.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then the rest of that
page,
the whole page following and half of the next page is all a single sentence.
Oh my gosh.
Can you believe that? I mean, that's
It's
amazing.
Astonishing. I mean, it's obviously English and not the French. So, but I mean, one feels like as a translator, you don't make that decision casually, so it must reflect something in the real text.
Well, what is that literary device that is like a piling up of descriptors? I think it's called a conjuries.
Yeah.
It seems
that's
like
right.
this is a conjuries, where usually the purpose of that is to almost like blowing up a balloon, like expand your
This is
image
not
of a person.
conjuries. This is a menagerie of a conjuries.
This is a couple conjuries put together.
Hugo, we love you. We love you, man.
And you love Louis Philippe.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you guys for your insights. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. It has been a wonderful trip, and we will see you again for yet another episode of How to Eat an Elephant. In the meantime, my friends, bon appetit.
Bon appetit.